Well, good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Laporta. Great to see you all here. We do want to get started, and I think that the majority of the conversation today is really going to revolve around the development of the 10-acre site. But before we do that, I want to just say hello. My name is Peter Noonan. I'm the superintendent of schools. Wyatt Shields is here, our city manager, and our mayor, Mayor Tarter. Would you like to say a few words before we get started?
All right. Well, again, I just want to thank you all for coming out. This is a pretty exciting day, I think, for a lot of folks in the city. There's been a lot of work that's gone on, a lot of groundwork that's laid the path for us here today, but it hasn't been so much public because we had a procurement process that required by necessity that a lot of these things be held confidential and outside the public eye. So it's a really exciting day, I think, to really bring this forward and get full public participation. It's something we've really wanted, and I think will make the project better. Evan and Company, I think you're going to find that we've got some very dedicated boards and commissions with a high level of knowledge and skills, and many of them are here today with us. So far, I think the project is great. It's only going to get better. I would like to introduce a few of my colleagues on council, at least. Mary Beth Conley, our vice mayor, is here. Phil Duncan on city council is here as well. And I don't know if there's anybody else from council here. I'm going to let you go ahead and make the school board introductions. But there's a great deal of interest in what you're doing. Our newspaper is here as well. So anyway, this is the start of a long process, I know, for all of us. But we really are excited about what you've done so far and look forward to hearing what you have to say today. So thank you very much.
Great. All right. Let's put this over here. All right. Well, again, good afternoon and welcome. I'm going to take just a second and introduce the school board members that are here. We have our chair of the school board, Lawrence Webb. Welcome. We've got Aaron Gill, school board member. We've got Shannon Litton is here, and Greg Anderson is here. Anybody else from the school board? All right. Well, I'm really excited because today's focus is going to be on the 10 acres of development as opposed to the school, which has been sort of the focus for about the last, I think, 8 Sunday series that we've held has been about the schools. So my presentation this afternoon is going to be relatively short, and I'm going to yield most of the time to my colleague and friend Wyatt Shields. But before I do that, I do want to say that today does really represent a confluence of events that I think are really exciting. Mary Beth Conley has been talking a lot about sort of how the zipper, if you will, are kind of coming together and intermeshing with each other, and sort of the schools project being one side of the zipper and the city being the other side of the zipper. And now the zipper is starting to come together because we have a developer on board for the 10-acre site. We've been working hard with Gilbane, Stantec, Quinn Evans, architecture and build team for the high school. They've had a chance now to meet on a couple of occasions and talk about sort of how do these two sites interplay with each other and what are some of the possibilities and really opportunities that are there to really make this site something special. So when we talk about this site, we've talked a lot about it being our school site and then the West Falls Church development site, or the 10-acre site as it's sort of affectionately known. But now that we've got some really, EYA, P.N. Hoffman and Associates together, now we can really talk about this as being a comprehensive site that includes economic development and the schools, and we're really excited about that, to have both partners on board. So with that, let me just take a second and sort of orient you to where we are with the schools. The last time we met together, I went through the schematic design in great detail. It took about an hour and a half, and then we did some questions and answers at that point. And it was a really good opportunity to sort of share where we are. But just to kind of reorient you here, on the right-hand side, you've got the 3 bars that represent the high school, the new high school. The right-hand bar is the 4-story bar. The middle bar is sort of the heart of the school, and you'll see a couple vegetative roofs there that sort of step up that represent sort of that heart of the school where students come in. And then the right-hand bar is what we are calling sort of the fat bar, which has the gymnasium, it's got the auditorium, and it's also 5 stories. So it's a little bit taller, and then 2 stories below grade as well. It butts right up to the stadium field there. We've got a brand new softball field that will come online, new tennis courts that will come online, and a new multi-purpose field in the back that will also come online. What won't be touched during any of the construction is the baseball field and the stadium field. Those will still remain in use, and we're excited about that. There will be a connection to the middle school, so you'll see on the top section here a little low area that kind of runs parallel to the backside of Henderson. That's one of the connecting points, and then also the piece right next to the 4-story bar is a connecting point too. It will not be a wide open connection where kids will easily sort of maneuver through. It will be a hallway, but the doors will be closed, so each of the 2 buildings will maintain their identity and their presence. So we will still have a Mary Ellen Henderson Middle School, and we will have a new George Mason High School. The front of the school, we've got sort of it's called a Wunnerf area, which is kind of a really beautiful open area that's paved with perhaps some brick pavers that represent many of the artifacts and some of the things that are coming over from the old school, and will be a nice, really open entrance to our school. So we're excited about that. Moving forward, maybe, how do I advance this, Wyatt? Oh, that'll do it, probably. Okay. So the next piece of this is kind of where are we in the process. So let me click us forward here. We are, it looks like we're moving really forward, fast. We started in November of 2017 with the bond passage and the RFP, and we've now moved ahead, and we are in the latter stages of the design process. We're through schematic design. That bar is just a little bit too far probably. We're still sort of in the detailed design process, which is very exciting. And sort of to walk us back just a little bit to give you a better sense of where we are, this is kind of where we see ourselves at this point. Bless you. Is in this area here in design development. So we've gotten into schematic design. Of course, we presented that at the last meeting here. And now as we get into this design development, this is the time where we're really digging in with our teachers. We've held about 20 meetings at the high school so far with the teachers to start talking about what are those classrooms really going to look like? How much linear storage space do you need? Where might some of the casework go? Where would the front of the class be? Where do we see some of our technology going? And really starting to explore a little further what the classrooms might look like, because we've gotten the geometry of the school correct at this point. And so we've got the exterior, and now we're starting to really look at what happens inside the building. And those conversations with our teams of teachers have gone really, really well, and they've given us some really good feedback. We've made some modifications and adjustments based on the feedback with respect to where some of the walls are, how we might utilize the space more effectively and more efficiently. And we are sort of hurtling towards the end of design development and also site permit submission. So Gilbane, Stantec, Quinn Evans team is going to do their permitting submission the 1st of January. I think it's like January 3rd or 4th is the day that they will actually put their site plan submission in. And so we're really excited about that. And during that period of time, of course, over the winter holiday break, we will sort of step away from this a little bit and try to regroup and catch our breaths. But as we come back, we're going to dig right back into design development, continue with those meetings with the team. Then we'll get into the March and June timeframe, and that's when we start talking about construction documents. We've gotten the schematic right, we've gotten the design development right, and now we're moving towards construction documents. And when we get to about 65% of completion of those construction documents, we'll sort of take a pause, if you will. That will go back to the school board for them to review. We'll start talking about what is the GMP, in other words, what's the greatest maximum price we're going to pay for this new building, which is pretty self-evident at this point. We passed a $120 million bond. We know that we're not going to exceed that, but are there places that we might be able to create some savings to create a contingency for the schools and the like? So at about 65% of those construction drawings, we will engage in that greatest maximum price project. And once that's negotiated and done, we will be ready to sort of rock and roll and get a shovel in the ground in June of this summer. And so we're really excited about that in moving forward. If you are on our website, and I would encourage all of you to go to our website, one of the documents that I want to share with you that you'll see when you're at our website at fccps.org, and if you go to the construction piece, each month I get these updates from the Gilbane, Stantec, Quinn Evans team. And these are really nice sort of dashboard looks about where we are in the project. So You'll see on the upper left some of the things that we've accomplished. We've delivered they have delivered the schematic design. The Planning Commission has been presented to. You'll see what some of the current work is and what some of the upcoming milestones are. So here they have in December the submission of documents for site plan approval. They've actually pushed that, as I said, to January because they really want to get it right, and they also know that the city is also going to take a break around the holidays, so why put something in that's just going to kind of sit for a couple of weeks. And so put it in January, really hit it full force, and then in February, again, we'll continue the design development. The graphic there kind of gives you a sense of where we are. So going back, we were at the preliminary evaluation stage, then we got to SDs, which are the schematic designs. Now we're at DDs. We'll move towards construction documents and then into construction. There's an overview statement. And then they've included some other pictures. So sort of the newer rendering of what the front of the school looks like, what a traditional or typical classroom might look like, what we're thinking about in terms of the cafe that I mentioned last time. So when you come up to that second floor, there's a cafe there with grab-and-go food, some hot and cool drinks, etc. A view from the back, and then sort of that main entrance of the heart of the school, if you will, as you come in. So I would really encourage you, if you have time and would be interested in hearing about what's happening with the school, that you do hop on our website and check it out, because all of the meetings that we've held are on the website. All of the FAQs that we've answered, and we've answered all of them to this point, are available to look at. And then the last piece I would say is if you have any questions, comments, or concerns regarding the school's plan of action, if you will, after a Sunday series or after you've looked at the information, you can also be linked to an email site, which is newgmhs@fccps.org, and that's sort of the repository for questions. And anything that comes in through that questioning portal, we are trying to get to in a timely fashion so that we can answer some of those questions for you. But knowing that today is really more about the 10-acre development site, before I turn it over to Wyatt, I did want to see if there were any questions that you all might have about the developments as they're happening at the schools. One last piece of information. We have been hosting class meetings. We had one with the freshman class last week. We'll be meeting with the sophomores this week. The juniors and seniors also this week at the high school to go through the design with them. They are asking really great questions. Some of the questions are really interesting, though, that I think represent the really unique student that we have here in the City of Falls Church. For example, we had a student, after they went through the presentation, asking if we could have a tunnel system to be able to get back and forth between Mary Ellen Henderson and George Mason High School, and maybe even the economic development site. And I don't know where they thought of that idea of getting a tunnel system together, but anyway. But yeah, it's like El Chapo or something. But anyway, so they are asking really good questions about, how far do we have to go to use a restroom? Where could we get some food? How can we access outdoor space? Where do we play? What do the rooms look like? And they've been really, really great. And we have been making some modifications and adjustments even based on the student feedback. So, yes, ma'am.
So did you are going to be untouched?
The baseball field and the stadium field will be untouched. The others will be touched. And we're in the process right now of developing where we're going to have our softball season this year. Not this year, the following year, once we're under construction. So we'll be 1 year without a softball field, and we've got some nice partners around us that we'll be able to utilize. We may have access to Larry Graves Field. We also have a softball opportunity at another place here in the City of Falls Church. And tennis already is played elsewhere, because you may or may not know our tennis courts are not, they're not great. So it'll be nice to have them on solid field.
Is the projected to be under the softball?
Yes, the geothermal field is still projected to be under the softball field. This will be a completely net zero ready building, if you didn't know that already. One of the great things that we are able to do with the two bars, the skinny bar and the fat bar, and even the roof at Mary Ellen Henderson, is utilize some of the open space. There will be no mechanical devices at all on the top of the new high school. In fact, it'll be a sort of an open field for PV array. And then any of the open space at Henderson will also be used for PV arrays, so that we can begin to generate some of our own energy as opposed to being reliant on others. So excited about that. Right. Well, thank you all for coming. Again, if you have questions, please don't hesitate to send us those, newgmhs@fccps.org, and I will turn it over to my good friend and colleague, Mr. Wyatt Shields.
Thank you, Peter. Good afternoon. My name is Wyatt Shields. I'm the city manager, and I'll do a quick introduction, and then I'm going to turn both the microphone and the floor over to Evan Goldman, who will present for the EYA P.N. Hoffman Regency Center's team, which is the city's selected partner for the 10 acres of development. I'm joined also by our project manager, Carly Aubrey, and as we're going through boards and commissions, Carly's going to be really a key staff member who's going to work with your staff liaison, with your board or commission on the application and on the comprehensive agreement as we go through the process. So just by way of introduction, there are some new faces in the room, and so welcome. We're glad you're here. This is actually, we've had 9 of these Sunday series meetings over the past year, and so this is our 10th. And we've tried to, as we've gone through every step of our process, we've tried to keep the public up to speed with what we're doing. And just by way of background, one sort of fundamental question is, why are we taking 10 acres of school-owned property to market? And the answer is, and this has been part of our thinking through the referendum and from the beginning of our planning, we are issuing a $120 million bond for the high school. That would be the equivalent of about 15 cents on the tax rate for your median homeowner, or 15 cents on the tax rate for all of our city. And so with the project that we're proposing, we believe we'll significantly reduce that. And in fact, the City Council has already raised taxes to help fund this project, and we currently anticipate that there will not need to be any additional tax rates increases for the high school project because of the economic development project that we're talking about in this presentation. The way we've managed this project is there's sort of 2 big areas of work. One is to design and build the high school, and Dr. Noonan and the school board are in charge of that project, and the City Council is in charge of the economic development piece, and the city staff are working through all of our boards and commissions on that. The 2 have to constantly inform each other. One can't happen without the other. And so we have a campus coordinating committee that's working to make sure that as we proceed through these 2 parallel projects, we're constantly informing each other. So what the last threshold that we've crossed is the council has entered into an interim agreement with the development team that you'll hear from in just a moment. And that came about after a pretty long process that stretched out since March to select that partner. In March, we issued a request for conceptual proposals. We received 6 bidders. And then in June, we down-selected those to the top-ranked, and we asked for detailed proposals from just the top-ranked of those original 6. On August 29th, we received 2 detailed proposals, and these are really thick books with all of the information that you'll see in just a moment. And then on November 19th, the City Council authorized me, the city manager, to execute an interim agreement. And what that interim agreement does is lays out a 6-month work plan for us to work together to develop a comprehensive agreement and a land use application, which will be very public, everybody can weigh in on, both of which we intend to have final action on May 28th, 2019. And so Carly's going to describe that process in a little bit more detail. The evaluation committee was stood up to go through all these proposals. We had 8 meetings of that evaluation committee, multiple meetings with the bidders to clarify information. There are really 3 big areas that the evaluation committee was looking at, and ultimately the City Council looked at to make this selection. Number 1, value to the city. What was the transaction and what value would it create for the taxpayers? 2, what was the quality of the development program? And what you'll see today, I think, illustrates a very high level of quality for the development program. And then project execution and risk. Has the team done this before? What's their track record? What's their financing? What are their assumptions? Are they all within the bounds of what's reasonable? And we had an outside independent expert help us make those judgments because we're not in the commercial real estate business ourselves, but we did have a very strong risk evaluation as well. But our team, and I think this is the point where we'll introduce Evan and Sean and the whole team. EYA, and they'll be able to tell their story a little bit for you as well, but some projects that you'll be familiar with that they've worked on. They were involved in the Mosaic just down the road. P.N. Hoffman was the lead for the Wharf, which is just opened this year in southeast D.C. And Regency is a really strong retail partner. The whole team has a very strong focus on placemaking and generating a lot of vibrancy and activity, and that's what we enshrined in our RFP of some of the key things we're looking for. So with that, let me ask Evan to go through your presentation on the program. Then I'll come back to talk about the major key terms in this development agreement, and then we'll talk schedule, and then we'd like to get comments and questions. In fact, before we talk about key terms, I think we'll let Evan and the team answer questions on the project. Do you want this one or?
Whichever one you recommend.
Why don't you do that one since you're going with it?
There we go. Can you all hear me pretty well? Okay, great. If it starts echoing, let me know. So first of all, thank you for the introduction, Wyatt. With me here right in front is Sean Seaman, who's kind of my counterpart over at P.N. Hoffman. We also have on his team Laura, I always call you Sean Feld. Sean Feld. Brian's with Torty Gallus. He's one of our architecture, or one of the people working on our team from an architecture perspective. One of you guys wave your hands back there. We also have Dave Lasso, who you probably know, and Karen White from, Dave is our legal counsel, and Karen's our civil engineer from Walter Phillips. So we can kind of answer questions from all different disciplines you might have today. But we're delighted to be here. Very excited to have kind of this first formal public meeting. My name is Evan Goldman. I'm a Vice President of Development and Acquisitions at EYA. We're a local company. We've been around for about 26 years now, and we largely build neighborhoods, typically with the residential side, focusing on the residential side, but a lot of placemaking, park spaces. We bring in partners on the commercial side, as we've done here, and so this is right up our alley. Prior to this, I was at a company named Federal Realty, which owns 2 large shopping centers in Falls Church, so I'm familiar with the area. But more importantly, I spent about 8 years working on a project called Pike and Rose on Rockville Pike that's similar to this. It's kind of a, that was on a similar type of road, and it was an urban mixed-use project like we hope to create here. And then, as was mentioned, Sean has incredible experience from having run the Wharf, which is, in my view, probably the best project or neighborhood that's been built in the city in about, I don't know, 30 years, or in the metro area. So what we're going to talk about today, if you just go to the next slide,
Okay.
is this, do I use this thing to advance or just touch it on there? Okay, there we go. Okay, perfect. So EYA, P.N. Hoffman, and Regency are equal partners on this. I had been talking to the city about this site for about 5 years, even back when I was with Federal Realty. And then knowing that the city has a very strong interest in seeing really good commercial development, both office and hotel, as well as retail on this site, we pulled in P.N. Hoffman because of their office and hotel experience, as well as their ability to curate cool placemaking and retail. And we pulled in Regency because they're one of the largest retail developers and owners in the country, and so they have relationships with all the types of tenants that you might want to see in the city, and in fact, a really good relationship with some key tenants. So that was the team we pulled together back in January to start thinking about the site. And so all of us are very knowledgeable on the project, but Regency would be the person that's going to focus more on the retail side. P.N. Hoffman will be very focused on hotel office, and then both EYA and P.N. Hoffman will be focused on the residential portion of the project. How many of you have seen the site plan already from the news or in looking things up. So, okay, so about a quarter of the room, so good. So for a bunch of you, this will be new. This is the economic development site. It's about 10 acres. The school site is right here. So Mary Ellen Henderson is sitting right here, and the new high school up there, Leesburg Pike and Haycock Road on the far right. And there were a few key constraints as we started thinking about how to design this site to meet the needs of the city from a tax revenue perspective, from the type of development they wanted to see, to be careful about not introducing too much residential because of concern about overcrowding in the schools. And so, for example, our first plan was, we can give you a lot more money and just build townhomes, but there was a concern about how many kids that would generate for the schools. And so that had a lot to do with where the site ended up. One of the major issues on the site is there's a lot of grade. As you drive up Route 7, you probably recognize that there's a hill as you get to the top towards the high school. It's about 26 feet from here to here, which is about 2.5 stories of a building. So quite a bit of grade. And so one of the first things was, how do you create a great flat retail main street that people can stroll and feel comfortable, that can be handicap accessible? And so that is part of what governed creating that retail street in that location. One of the initial ideas before we got the topographic map showing us the kind of the mountain that the site's on, it was to have a retail street running east-west towards the school, connecting to the Federal Realty Shopping Center to the right. But that would create a situation where you'd be walking up a hill along the retail. You wouldn't be able to have outdoor cafes. The retail, individual retail pieces would be sloping up the street, which makes it hard to have tenants have flexibility on how big they want to be. And so having a flat retail main street is really critical. So that governed the location. The second piece was this goal to try to connect this development site and the city to the metro. And so many of you know that the metro is back there. It's one of the lesser utilized metro stations in the system. And so how do we create, for pedestrians, cyclists, as well as cars, much better visibility and direction towards the metro itself, and make that walk to the metro attractive and nice and appealing so people will be more willing to do it. Versus kind of through parking lots. And so that was a second reason why we directed it this way. A third key issue was there's a desire to have a grocery store in this site, and the logical location for that grocer is right here at the corner of Haycock and 7, where there's the most visibility and where you have a traffic light where cars are stopped and they can see the store. And so with a grocery store here, that somewhat dictated the size of that block with the grocery store and parking behind it, and that's why you see that's one of the larger blocks on the plan. The fourth thing was interactions with the school. And so originally, if those of you who haven't seen the original plan, the high school had a field here and then a little bit of parking below it. And what that did is it created a little bit of a barrier between the economic development site and the high school. And it made it hard to have streets that connected through between the development. And so when the high school team selected the high school selected their construction and development team, one of the changes that came with that was the proposed design from that team, which was to create this really nice plaza in front of the high school entrance and to have this grand entrance gesture to the school. And that opened up the ability to connect our site to that site and really have them work collectively. And in many ways, it actually informed our retail merchandising strategy for our site. So part of the retail that we'll have on our site will be geared towards high school students, families, middle school students, things that they might want to do directly after school, make it easy for parents when they're doing drop-off or pick-off to also do errands while they're there. And so the retail merchandising strategy here will have, on top of the grocery store, restaurants, coffee shops, but also, one of the tenants that we're talking to is a music school. You can envision a karate studio or dance studios, the types of things that kids might want to do for activities as they leave school, and gives them kind of that after-school activity. The last piece was, and it's really critical, if you're going to create a place, you really have to deliver a lot of it at once. And so you've probably seen developments over time throughout the region where they kind of go piecemeal and there's a building at a time. And what often happens is that building is never as exciting as people expect it to be. The retail never does as well as they hoped it would be. And then the next building never happens and it sits as a parking lot, and these big kind of planned projects never really come together. It's critical in your first phase when you're delivering to have enough critical mass of retail that the actual retail can all be successful and work together. It's also critical to create the neighborhood and the park spaces and have all the placemaking and make it exciting. So the first time that you, as a customer, walk onto that property, you feel like it's safe and it's complete and it's attractive and you want to come back. And you don't go home and tell all your neighbors, maybe it'll be good in 5 years or 10 years. And that's really important. And so we tried to come up with a plan with different uses on each block, so we could deliver all of this at once. So this is 925,000 square feet of development in the first phase. And when it delivers, it's almost all of the retail, 125,000 square feet of retail. It has a senior housing component, a hotel, an office, multifamily apartments, condominiums, as well as all the retail and the park, all in that first phase. So there will be 2 years of construction, but when that construction's over, it's really over. And for the most part, the whole project is built out. The remaining pieces on the outside will be developed after phase 1, but you can see they're far from the high school. So there's this separation between the high school and the future construction parcels as well. And then the last part of that, one of the big features of the site is this central park space. And so it's 60 feet just in the park that's in the median of these streets. So it's a pretty nice, generous space. Federal Realty, my prior company, has few examples of projects they've built, one of which is in California called Santana Row that's been very successful, where the active median becomes a park, where there's yoga in the park, there's music in the park, there's festivals. We have the ability to close down that street and have entrances to the garages from the other streets, so that when you want to have a citywide festival of some sort, we can house that in this area. And so it really creates kind of an outdoor living room and space for the community. Part of this vision also has to do with the connection to the metro. And so as you know, the high school site is 10 acres. Next door to you is a Virginia Tech parcel that's 8 acres. And beyond that is a WMATA parcel owned by Metro that's 15 acres. And so one of the kind of visions we've been thinking through is how do you connect this site ultimately to Metro so that the whole thing feels like it was planned collectively, and so that you have a retail main street that continues all the way from 7 back towards the Metro and makes that entire walk more attractive and safer and nicer experience. To give you a sense of scale, that 34 acres is about the size of Mosaic District down in Merrifield, so that just gives you a sense of scale of how big that property is. But obviously today it doesn't feel like that at all. It's kind of individual separate parcels, but we have an ability to link them together. So our team is one of 2 finalists for the Virginia Tech parcel. Their idea is to stay on site as of right now and keep academic programs there, but potentially add some student housing, potentially add additional programs or newer buildings there. So we're working with them to think through that process, and they will hopefully select one of the 2 teams sometime early next year or in the next 6 months. What's critical is really creating the street that connects right through the middle, so that pedestrians, bikes, cars have the ability to go all the way back to the Metro without having to come back out onto Haycock, which is already, as you know, has traffic today. Beyond that is the Metro Station property, and so the comprehensive plan in Fairfax County calls for fairly, lower scale residential development on that parcel, and that's generally what we're showing there with a little bit of retail to continue that safe pedestrian walk all the way back to the Metro, kind of having stores open as you come home or as you're going to work early in the morning or coming home late at night. And so this is ultimately a perspective that we had created as part of our submission that shows you what the site might look like. We're standing on the Virginia Tech parcel looking out towards Route 7, which is in the distance, and this is that Main Street park. And you can see there's little retail kiosk buildings in the center, so you can grab ice cream and sit out in the park on a nice day. There's a second kiosk. We'll figure out what the right retail is for that space. But those kiosks serve an important purpose in that they connect the retail from both sides of the street to each other, so it feels like it's all connected. And then it also enlivens that active park. So it allows us to have programming in the park. It makes sure that people are coming to the central space and the actual park itself. And you can see how small the people are to get a sense of scale of how big that space is. And this is an image down inside that park space as well. One of the critical pieces that we're looking at right now is this building right here. And I'll show you where that is on plan. Give me 1 second, sorry. I realize every time I go in front of it, I'm doing this. I'll stand on this side. There we go, that's better. Only took me 15 minutes to figure out that I should be on this side. So this space up here is the hotel, which is attached to, we're calling it the Civic Building, and that's a music venue. So the second floor of that building is a music venue with an outside deck of about 4,000 square feet. That will have concerts and music. We had talked about with the city this idea of wanting to have a large space for events inside the city. And so that is a big open room that has the ability to be rented out for parties, rented out for special dinners, and it's connected to the hotel. So people can stay in the hotel on site, have this great room right next door. On the weekends or evenings, it can be also used for music. On the first floor of that building is where the music school would sit, facing the high school. And so there's this nice symbiosis between the music venue, the music school, and the high school, which has a great music department as well. And so the three of them could kind of work together in concert. But that view that we were just looking at is looking at that music venue in the distance. So it's the second floor of this building right here with the outside rooftop deck above the retail. A little bit of a blow up of that retail street, of the Park Street in the middle. And as you can see up on the right, almost all the edges of the site have retail on them. And so one of the main reasons we do that is so that when you're walking on the sidewalks, it feels safe. You're looking inside stores, it's active, it's well lit. It doesn't feel like dead space. And so we've tried to cover almost all the ground level with retail. And then as we've continued, this is just a slightly further generation of the plan, obviously not as pretty or rendered yet, but we are continuing to go back and forth with the city and work through the plan itself over the next few months. And then this image I'll share, you might have seen on our plan, there's a kind of a structured parking garage on what was the school's surface parking lot. And so one thing we've been talking about with the city and the school board is the idea of having a more efficient, kind of larger structured parking deck there. And that would result in a larger payment of land to the city. And it would also give an opportunity for marketing, for art on the buildings, for branding, for the school. And so these are some examples of other garages where people have been really creative with art projects and murals on buildings. And then kind of some early, very, very early conceptual ideas of doing something on the garages that actually harken back to George Mason High School and to Mary Ellen Henderson. So you can see the Mustang on this side of the garage, and the idea of having a big signpost for the middle school as well. And then the next step would be working with the high school's art department to figure out a way to get the kids involved or the students involved in art on the buildings, and whether that's an annual tradition of doing some sort of mural or some sort of a ceramic collage that gets placed on the building, or it's, it could be whatever the art department wants to do. We would want to work with them collaboratively on that idea and really kind of bring the school out into the spaces, whether it's through placemaking that we choose, art on the buildings, even the high school plaza, which will have the music school sitting on it. Is there a music theme or some sort of sculpture that makes sense within that park space as well? And then finally, really why, what I'm so excited about working with P.N. Hoffman is they have this great track record and history of placemaking. And that's kind of my background as well from my time at Federal Realty. And placemaking is kind of the secret sauce behind what makes places feel great. You go to Rockefeller Center at Christmas time and it's crowded, obviously, but it feels great for a reason, right? Everybody knows the tree, everybody knows the ice skating rink, you've seen it on TV, the landscaping is beautiful, the placemaking there is unbelievable, the art. And so as you walk around, you feel like you're transported to another place. And the buildings are actually a beautiful, very simple Art Deco backdrop to what really happens at the street level, which is the most important part of that space. And so that happens in places all around the world. When you go on vacation, you typically go to places that have great placemaking. Most people don't go to places that are fairly dry and drab. So how do you bring that to new development and make sure that we're creating places that are exciting? And so part of it starts with people. How do you create places that can be used by people, that encourage people to come? Places are not exciting if they don't have a lot of people in them. And so whether it's through music events or festivals, having a regular cadence of things going on inside the development, so you can count on the fact that if you show up on a Sunday, there's going to be something interesting to see or something interesting to watch. Whether it's kicking off a run or a bike ride or going and doing yoga in the park, there's a reason why people will be showing up on a regular basis, and that's the type of stuff that we have a lot of experience cultivating within our neighborhoods or the neighborhoods we develop. It also has to do with the materials, so the types of materials you're walking on, the types of materials you're looking at, the fountains for beautiful sound in the background, the trees and the landscaping is critical, and the architecture on the buildings. For everybody's different, we're all unique, so one of you may respond more to landscaping and fresh flowers, and one of you may respond more to really cool, pretty architecture. Another one might prefer just to sit and watch people go by. Everybody's different. And so we have to have a certain saturation level of thoughtfulness with the design of the project that will kind of cater to all different types of people. And most people will just kind of wander around and not know why they like it, but kind of like it. Even little details, the manhole covers, the signage, the sculptural pieces, the furniture is extremely important. Whatever you choose for the landscape furniture, the fact that it's movable, that you can, as a person, have some control over where that seat's going to be and move out of the sun when it gets too sunny and you're starting to burn, and move into the shade, move out in the sun when it's cold and you want to be in the sun, right? You want to have some control over that environment, and a lot of that has to do with the furnishings and the way the site is designed. And with that control comes ownership. And so the places like Bryant Park in New York, where there's this ability to control your environment and to decide where you're going to sit and how you're going to sit and what that seat's going to feel like, or maybe you're going to sit on the grass, are the types of spaces that communities tend to then own and start thinking of as their own, and it stops being a project and it starts being a neighborhood. And that's ultimately our goal here, is to create something that 10 years from now, 15 years from now, nobody will really remember who developed it, quite frankly. It will just be a neighborhood of buildings and a place you guys want to go with, and hang out. So that's what we're shooting for here. Although it's a high aspiration, we think we'll be able to achieve it. And so that is our last slide, and happy to, Sean and I, and we can all answer more.
While you all are thinking of questions, I'm going to have a few slides in just a moment that will go over some of the key terms in the interim agreement, and I'll cover that material in just a moment. But any other questions just on the program and on the vision for the site itself for the developers?
So you did a good job of explaining how it lays out with this program and then the Virginia Tech and a little bit of the Metro. What about the broader picture of I know there's some stuff going on with the state of Virginia for hooking into I-66. What are some of the broader plans to maybe hook into the WNOD trail, which is not that close, but it is kind of close. It's a major biking thoroughfare. So some of this broader, what goes on beyond there? Or is it going to be, okay, we've got a parking lot in front of the Giant and then a building across the street?
Do you want to start, and then I'll follow you, or do you want me to?
Sure,
Okay.
I can just say a few words. One, we have been talking with Fairfax County and with VDOT from the beginning, and with Virginia Tech and UVA, really from the beginning of this process. So I think there's an attempt, and I think it's pretty deep roots now in terms of trying to coordinate on transportation and how the whole site's going to work. In terms of how this fits in with the larger sort of whole west side of the City of Falls Church, and Carly can speak to this as well, but we are planning to restart the West Falls Church area plan this spring before the approvals are given final consideration for this project. And that would look at the Don Beyer property, that would look at the Federal Realty property next door, so that we can think about the whole area, at least within the city limits, holistically. And so more to come on that, and more engagement on that. Does that help answer your question?
It kind of does, because that whole area you've got new, and then you've got some stuff that's
Right.
it's starting to show its age.
That's right. And one other note, in terms of transportation improvements, we have, through the regional body, the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority, received funding in the amount of $15 million for transportation improvements related to this site. And that includes connectivity to West Falls Church Metro, but it also includes connectivity to the WNOD. And you may have noticed that Fairfax County just recently updated and kind of refreshed its sidewalk connection to the WNOD. But I think there's a much more sort of powerful connection you can make to really try to pull people from the trail into the site, make that a very comfortable route for walkers and bikers.
Well, can I just add on to that? I want to introduce myself again. My name is Brian Tomeno. I work for Forty Gallison Partners. I'm an urban designer. Just to follow up that.
Microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Just to repeat, my name's Brian. I work for Torty Gallison Partners, and I'm a urban designer and planner there. So just to add on to your question, we've certainly looked at the larger scale as well. And one of the reasons we did kind of a grid of pedestrian scale blocks that have a lot of connections in and out of the site, not only for vehicular but also for bikes and pedestrians. So we trying to frame that where once we build our piece, then other pieces kind of connect into that grid and start making a larger place.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot. We used to have an image. It was in one of our submissions to the city that showed kind of a grid for the entire kind of western part of Falls Church, quite frankly. with the assumption that over time some of those properties will redevelop and create economic opportunity as well as kind of nicer pedestrian streetscapes.
I will go here and then there. Yes, ma'am. Hi, Erin.
Hi, Whit. I'm Erin Gell on the school board. Whit, can you update us on where we are with the legality of locating the parking garage on school land? And what's the plan if that term is determined by fair?
So the agreement with the boundary adjustment that brought the high school into the city's corporate limits is that 70% of the campus, which is 34 acres, 70% of that 34 acres shall be used for educational uses. 30% can be used for any other purpose that the city so deems. And so when we talk about the 10 acres, that's where that 10-acre reference comes to. It's really 10.8 acres.
10.38.
Yeah. 10.38 acres. And so the city is going to comply with that provision. Ultimately, what we will do, just to confirm that we're in compliance, we'll lay it out, we'll plat it out, and we'll send that to the county for them to see it and say, yeah, that conforms with the agreement. And our intention is to get that done before the comprehensive agreement, just so everybody feels comfortable with that. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I just think two questions. Notes on your drawing, right? Story building. What's the maximum height in this area? As a follow-up. Second, as a follow-up, I see you have a couple green roofs there. Are you going to have a requirement for net zero energy buildings with any building that's going to be in this site?
So to your first question, so the limit here is 15 stories. That was kind of the zoning, I guess, was it approved last week or?
That's right.
So the B2 zone that was approved here last week has a 15-story height limit. We don't envision every building being 15 stories. There might be one, maybe two at most. Most of the buildings will be kind of different heights and scales, so you get a sense of kind of like when you're in an urban area, there's different heights to buildings. So the civic building is 2 stories. The first residential building is 5 to 6 stories. The office building will likely be in the 6 to 8 story range, so there'll be different heights of buildings. My guess is the future phase buildings would be the tallest ones. That would be 15 stories. As you know, it gets more and more expensive the taller you go because you get to concrete construction. And so those would be buildings you'd probably likely do in later phases. And then on the sustainability side, yeah, we actually were just talking a sidebar when the school was talking about being net zero ready, so we'll do a little investigation onto that. What we've proposed so far is almost all the buildings are LEED Gold. We're LEED Neighborhood Gold as well. Both of our teams have a lot of experience with sustainability, so you are seeing green roofs, you are going to see incredible stormwater management techniques that we'll use, and whether that's capturing water in green roofs or capturing them in cisterns, reusing the water from those buildings throughout. We would like to look into solar, and I know that at the Wharf you guys have quite a bit of solar. At my project that I had worked on at Pike and Rose, we actually have solar carports on top of the structured parking garage that then energizes the entire garage and part of the hotel. And so, so we're very early on. We just were awarded this about a month ago, and so we are catching our breath and trying to get into all that. So we haven't gotten far enough along to fully answer your question yet, but we're studying all of that, and we understand the city's desire to have this be extremely sustainable.
And LEED Gold, nice, but why not LEED?
It's a great question.
I mean, why limit yourself, particularly with the way
Yeah. So what
the
it?
climate is changing?
That's a good
Why
point.
not
So.
LEED as opposed to?
Pass around the mic.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so we haven't gotten far enough along to fully understand yet exactly what we're going to be doing. A lot of, from a sustainability perspective, HVAC becomes the biggest issue, air conditioning and cooling of buildings. And so you can achieve in LEED Gold, quite frankly, a lot of what you can achieve in Platinum. Platinum does add some other bells and whistles to it. But we think at LEED Gold, you're kind of benefiting the city the most where they're getting enough land value out of the buildings. When you go from Gold to Platinum, you do increase the costs a lot, so then it decreases land value. So there's kind of a balance there of how much you can pay for the land and how high you can go. But we'll be focused on kind of the key things from a sustainability perspective that really do benefit from an environmental perspective as part of what we select as Gold. Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Carly. I just wanted to follow up on that question, which I think was a great one. And in full disclosure, I'm the chair of the Environmental Sustainability Council.
There we go.
So we have a perspective on this. And I think I'm really excited about this project. And I know this team has done some really innovative, sustainable development. So I'm really excited about that. One thing we've been thinking a lot about is the life of this project. And during the life of this project, we will go from currently about 9 extreme heat days per year. That means over 95 degrees. To about 18 per year between 2020 and 2039, and then something like 35. So it's well within the life of this project,
Right.
which means energy costs are projected to go up 5% across the state of Virginia between 2020 and 2039, and mortality will increase. So I think something like an additional 420 deaths per year because of the increased heat.
Right.
So I think the question about net zero is a really good one because that's going to help users keep energy costs low. But another question I have for you is, what are you thinking about in terms of mitigating urban heat island effect and the ability of people to keep using the space as the temperature increases?
That's a great question too. So Torty Gallis, one of the reasons we selected them, they have a really great background in sustainability as well as a planner, and so they're part of our team. They're actually starting to work on the Green LEED scorecard and think through sustainability. So there are a few good things. Obviously, green roofs help with heat island effect quite a bit. Painting the roofs white, reflective, helps with heat island effect. The efficiency of the energy systems we're selecting on site is helpful. The types of trees and creating shade. So, one of the nice parts of this project is that within this open space, we'll have the ability to create a lot of shade, which is going to become more and more critical over time. The way the site is designed also, the main street cuts north-south, so you'll get sunshine on half the block on one side of the street in the morning and sunshine on the other side of the street in the afternoon. So there will always be a side of the street where the sidewalk is shaded versus streets that go east-west where there's always one side that for almost the whole day is in the heat, and this gets really hot. So as I said, we haven't gotten fully on board, far along with design enough to start really studying that stuff, but that'll be part of what we're looking into as we design.
And one thing I'll just note, we did put those provisions into the RFP as well and signaled really throughout this process that sustainability and resilience was really important to the city, that this be designed for a changing climate.
Yeah.
And so some of the key terms that will go into the comprehensive agreement are these LEED commitments, and that energy intensity usage, we want it to be at a level so that there can be, if there is a renewable energy generation on site, that can get the site to net zero, just like we're shooting for the school. This one other note that there is not intended to be parking below this park, so
Right.
this will be on solid earth, and that will promote healthy tree growth.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. So the caliper of the tree you choose when you plant your initial trees on a site is pretty critical. And so oftentimes in development, you see these kind of little spindly trees. They look like the Charlie Brown Christmas tree. And in 20 years, they'll be great. But that first initial caliper is extremely important for the first 5 years. And so that's something we can look at too. We're giving landscaping. It'll provide shade more quicker. You can't go too big because then it'll sometimes struggle to survive the move from its current location to the new location. But that's something we can look at too. And if there are other ideas, we're open to send us an email with some thoughts or other projects you've seen where they've done stuff really creative. We'd love to learn too.
Yes, sir. And I'll just note, I want to thank our local cable access staff. Genevieve here is filming this so it can be rebroadcast. And that's the principal reason for the microphone, as well as so people in the room can hear.
So back on the parking garage proposed on the school land, if that doesn't go forward, what are the other Plan B fallbacks for parking?
Yeah, so if it doesn't go forward, we would do two things. Let me just go back to the plan for a second. There we go. So the two changes that would be made is this block would have below grade parking, probably 2 to 3 levels below, to handle the office and office, hotel, and senior living component. And then this garage inside the the multifamily building would get a little bigger. And so we'd kind of disperse the parking amongst those two different options. And then of course this would go away and just go back to the surface lot that was intended by the schools. And so we do have a backup plan just in case.
Okay, you're going to have to put up with this question every time. Will the parking garage be built strongly enough to eventually put something on top of it?
The above grade garage? You know, that question came up last time, and
I
haven't-
know, you'll hear,
Yeah,
it came from me.
I'm gonna
You'll
get you
hear
an
about it.
answer. I will get you an answer for the next time. I didn't spend any time thinking about that one
Okay,
yet.
because that's important. There's no sense in building a structure of just a parking garage, which is very necessary, but the ability to put something up on top of it is extremely important. And we've had that situation with expansion of City Hall and all kinds of things. So that's really great importance.
Okay, yeah, I just haven't had a chance to talk to the precaster to see how that works, the precast garage, but we.
No,
let's
don't
look at
worry, I won't forget it.
Okay, well, let me go through just a few slides on some of the key financial terms of the interim agreement that will go into the comprehensive agreement. So as was noted in the material terms, the interim agreement is principally laying out a schedule for the applications and for a comprehensive agreement that will all go towards this May 28th date for final consideration. But we did want to put some key terms in the interim agreement, such as the environmental commitments that were a part of their proposal. Those are enshrined in the interim agreement. Things like affordable housing, which in the RFP we asked for at 6% of all of the housing in the unit and the project be affordable at 60% area median income. So provisions like that are in the interim agreement as well. But I'll just hit some of the financials so you're aware of those. What's envisioned for the site is a 99-year land lease. It will be a ground lease, and 99 years later it will revert back to the city. There are carve-outs of that land lease because, as Evan noted, there is a condominium component to the project in Phase 1 and in Phase 2. Those condominiums would be sold, that land would be sold fee simple. The rest of it would be under a 99-year lease. So there's two basic land values that come to $44.5 million. In Phase 1, that value is at $34.5 million, and then in Phase 2, it's the higher of the appraised value of Phase 2 or $10 million, whichever is higher. So in other words, $10 million is the minimum, but we'll go through an appraisal process. We'll provide a credit for infrastructure, and that will be the value if it's higher than $10 million. In addition to that basic land value of $44.5 million, the shared parking garage option, which is what we were just discussing, this is the above grade parking garage. Because it is so much less expensive to build parking above grade relative to undergrade, there would be an additional $5.3 million value that would accrue to the city if we exercise that option. And we're working through the pros and cons of that option with the school administration right now. Then second, there's an opportunity to create a community development authority. This would be an entity that would be created by the City Council and appointed by the City Council, which would have the authority to issue bonds to pay for infrastructure on the site. If we were to pursue that option, and we'll do our due diligence on it, that would create an additional $3 million of value. So those two together would create an additional $8.3 million on top of the $44.5 that's in the basic land transaction. In addition, for the life of the lease, 99 years, every time the project is either sold or refinanced, there's a capital event fee of 1/2 of a percentage point, and that would be paid to the city. So for the leasehold alone, each time that happens after build-out, that would generate a value of about $2.4 million. So if you assume that that will happen once every 10 to 15 years, that'll be a kind of an ongoing payment that would come to the city whenever those capital events occur. There's also a capital event for the condos at a lower rate, a 0.25% rate for the condos whenever they change hands as well. So I put this slide back up there again. When we're talking about the shared parking if this option is taken, and that's a joint decision of the city and the school board, then that's what would generate the additional $5.3 million in value. But there are really significant design issues to consider here, and so we need to work those through. Some positives are that this provides shared parking for the schools. It would provide the 187 spaces that the schools had already designated for the ground of this site, but it would also be very convenient for football games or PTA nights, that the surge parking will be very convenient and centrally located for the school as well. Otherwise, this parking, like during daytime, will serve the office, the senior, the hotel, and the music. This is a chart that hopefully you all can see, but this lays out the payments over time. So the first, this stream of payments, which totals the $34.5 million for the phase 1, it comes in these payments. The first one would be in May 2019, in other words, about 6 months from now, and that would be that payment would be received by the city right after the comprehensive agreement and before the city issues construction bonds for the high school. The next payment's in 2021 when the land actually physically is conveyed to the development team after the new high school is completed. And then there'll be 3 years after that of $7 million each. So a total of 4 years with $7 million payments. The $3 million CDA plus up, that would occur in 2021 if we choose that option. The $5.3 million plus up for the off-street parking would come in 2023 if we choose that option. The phase 2 payment of a minimum of $10 million will be either 3 years after completion of phase 1 or 2029, whichever date comes first. So that's the payment for phase 2. And then the capital event fees will be an ongoing that goes on for the life of the leasehold. We also did fiscal impact analysis of the proposal. We're going to do more with the special exception application as we go through, but we're estimating approximately $6 million a year of net fiscal impact. And that's a lot. That's a very powerful net fiscal impact. And then it really relates to the fact that it has a strong hotel in it, a grocery store in it, and a really strong retail program. Those are the things that really generate a positive net fiscal impact for the city. So that's all that I have on the key terms. I'd be happy to answer any questions on those. And then I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Albury for a discussion of next steps and schedule. Yes. Where's the mic?
Thank you.
Very basic, please. It's we would pay for the infrastructure improvements by way of a community development authority that issues bonds, and therefore we take on the debt, or the developer pays. Is that basic concept?
Great question. So if we choose not to do a community development authority, the development team is going to pay for all of the infrastructure. That's streets, that's sewerage, that's new water mains, et cetera, et cetera. The Community Development Authority, however, could be an effective means for us to sort of collectively finance the infrastructure. The key thing for the city, though, is we're issuing a lot of debt for this high school. So we will have very high metrics in terms of debt per capita, debt per assessed value, and all those metrics. So we're not eager to take on extra debt. So in our agreement, we have said that if the CDA is stood up, there'll be no moral or general obligation by the city to back those bonds. But that's our intent, that would be our statement, but we need to do our due diligence on that and understand exactly how that would work. We've never stood up a CDA before, so it will be new for us. They certainly exist, they're all throughout Virginia, but what happens if, say, the development is delayed and the CDA, which is a key part of the CDA, I should have said from the beginning, they would have a up to 15-cent tax rate on this project itself. that would pay for the debt service for those bonds. So if that project is delayed, it's not going to generate the money to pay the debt service. Who then pays? That would be the concern. But we've got time to work that out, and we can, at the end of the day, I think we'll make a decision with our eyes wide open in terms of the pros and cons. Okay, Carly.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'll just go through the schedule. We are currently in the due diligence period, and that's estimated to end in mid-January. We have started, obviously, with the town hall meetings, introducing the project to the community, and we are also starting with some work sessions. They've gone to the Economic Development Authority, and this week will be going to the Planning Commission and the school board. And we've also started introducing the development team and the project to city staff, who will be reviewing the project for technical requirements, as well as the board and commission staff liaisons to get them familiar with the project and how to present it to their boards. So we are also, in January and February, there'll be a submittal of the special exception application, and then we're anticipating a first hearing by the City Council at the end of February, in which it will be referred to all the boards and commissions. And between February, actually really just March and April, we'll be really hitting the ground hard as far as getting in front of all the boards and commissions. We anticipate that being primarily in March. We are looking at having sort of joint boards and commission meetings possibly to, group the groups together that have similar purviews, and that will really help in getting in front of as many people at one time. So, and then Planning Commission will have a recommendation on April 1st. Between that date and the end of May, we'll be working to incorporate board and commission comments from staff and comments from the public into a revised application that will then be in front of the council for final consideration in late May. And as Wyatt mentioned, concurrently with that will be negotiations with the comprehensive agreement. Just want to mention that the special exception application will be slightly different format than what those people that are used to seeing special exceptions will look like. It will be truly a conceptual plan. It will look at building layout and heights. It will look at the types of uses and the quantity of those uses. There will be parking included, description of the phasing plan that they've talked about, a conceptual landscaping plan, and also general open space plan, where those open space areas will go. What won't be included during this first initial stage are architectural elements, the fine details, like what the materials are going to be, the composition of those materials, exactly where each tree and shrub is going to go. There'll be more kind of somewhat of what Evan showed with those placemaking components, kind of conceptual ideas of what we're considering. But all the comments and everything that will be gathered in this initial stage will then be fed into the next stage of entitlement review, which is the special exception site plan. And that will look at all the details that is typically looked at during a special exception, as well as the technical requirements for a site plan. And that will have a broader time frame, approximately 2 years. So that will be when the public and the boards and commissions can really delve into the details. I think that's about it for the schedule. It's going to be really fast this next 6 months, but there'll be more to come after that. So if there's any questions.
Well, that was an outstanding presentation. Well, any other just general questions for us, either on the development program, on the key terms? Yes, ma'am.
Since the buildings will be fairly tall, what do you have planned to mitigate light and noise pollution to the surrounding residential neighborhoods?
I think one of the I think probably one of the key things, you asked about light and what was the other concern? And noise. Certainly during construction, I think noise will need to be something that we'll work through with surrounding neighborhoods. I don't think that in terms of shadow impacts, we haven't done the shadow studies yet, but I would be very surprised if any of the shadow studies actually make it across to any residential neighborhoods. That would mean like if a shadow study is determining if, you know, if an adjacent property owner would be put into shadow because the building is so tall.
I mean more bright lights.
Oh, I see. Okay. We're going to work with the surrounding neighborhoods. We're interested in what the homeowners associations have to say about the plans. And we'd be happy to come to the HOAs and meet with you and just go through the plans in detail with you and get comment from you on them. Traffic also is very much on, I think, everybody's mind when you think about this project. It's important for the schools about how traffic works. It's important for the city as a whole and certainly the immediately adjacent neighborhoods. We did receive funding, as I mentioned earlier, to help with transportation improvements. I think the main idea is to try to take some of the load off of the Shreve Route 7 intersection and have traffic actually go through the site and a grid of streets so you can access West Falls Church directly, you can access UVA and Virginia Tech directly, and take pressure off of Shreve and Haycock through a good road network. We are also we've gone through our initial transportation study with VDOT. They have recommended that a signal be on Route 7 to help mitigate traffic, to get traffic in and out of the site. It is our intention that that signal would not be aligned with Chestnut Street, and that's been a county, essentially a key county concern that we will work with them to address. So those are a couple comments on that, but as we go forward, we'll have a lot of conversations and a lot of work with you to make sure this is a project that works for everybody. Yes, Tim.
Kind of tying into that transportation issue, has there been any updated information from VDOT on the flyover that's going to connect in from the one exit on to make it directly accessible to the metro station?
Carly, do you know the latest on that? That is definitely planned. It is definitely going to happen. The start date, I don't know.
Trying to recollect all the dates. I feel like it was coming up this year, I believe. I think later in the year. So, but there hasn't been any update on their website as far as any changes to that. So, but I could double check that.
That the flyover will give eastbound traffic on 66 direct access into the West Falls Church Metro. Currently, eastbound, you have to get off, go on Route 7, then take a left on Haycock and access it that way. So this will be, that will mitigate some traffic in of itself. The other improvement that's happening with the inside the Beltway toll funds is that new sound walls will be installed all along 66, but including at the school property and our surrounding neighborhoods.
I think the traffic question is really good because there's going to be a lot of questions about that. But back to the light pollution, I mean, just as an example, the nice little garage that Metro has produces an amazing amount of light. Very distracting and annoying from our neighborhoods. So is the team thinking about some way to mitigate that with the new buildings that are going up and the new?
We have not really gotten into that level of detail with design. It is important, and in the city's development throughout the city, we try to make sure that light is pointed downward, not broadcasting up. Essentially having night sky. We don't have a night sky ordinance per se, but in the code it does say that glare shall not go across boundary lines, and so we are going, that will be our intention going into it.
I mean, just the fact that these lights are on in that garage 24/7, that's not even the smartest and most efficient way to light a garage. I mean, sensors that, I know that's not the garage, but you're going to have a garage. and you're going to have other buildings. But to have lights on all the time, I mean, you need to work them on some kind of occupancy sensor or something. And by the way, Baltimore has a great program for all of its parking garages like that, just in case anybody's here from Falls Church City.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, so there's a few things we typically look at. So dark skies is important when you're designing buildings. So lights that typically going down versus up is extremely important to make sure you're not having light pollution into neighborhoods. Light sensors, as you just said. The office buildings certainly, which are, most of the residential buildings will have blinds, but the office buildings will often have light that spills out if the lights aren't off in the evening. And so almost all new office buildings are on sensors where the lights just go off if nobody's in the office building. So they go off at night and you're saving energy in that way as well. And then on the garages, to the extent that's possible, we're certainly open to doing the same thing where the lights just go off at night. We obviously don't want it to be dangerous for people going to get their cars at night if the lights don't go on. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Okay, well, thank you all for coming out on, Peter.
You had an earlier slide that showed January 20th date as a holiday weekend, so we're going to maybe try to refigure that date.
All right, we'll circle back to, and then get publicity out on when our next Sunday series meeting will be. Probably be then January 28th if we go back to the fourth Sunday, or 20. Any rate, more to come on when the next Sunday series will be. Thank you all for coming on a rainy Sunday afternoon, and we will stay in close contact as this project goes through, and looking forward to working with you on it.
Well done.